and maybe it would be less. It would be a little.
Made possible by grants from Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, Eastern Consolidated, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Terra CRG, the Wickoff Group, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Commercial Mortgage Lending, Ariel Property Advisors, Genova Burns. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, AmTrust Title, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Connect One Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Hendler Real Estate Organization, Hersha Hospitality, HAP, Investment Developers, Hodges Ward Elliott, Inc., Investors Bank, iFunding, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Paulsonelli, Rosewood Realty Services, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Knackle Group at Cushman and Wakefield, the Meringoff Family Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Oh, crystal ball. 7 days ago, the world changed. There was an election. I don't know what's going to happen in the commercial real estate or residential market, but perhaps my wonderful guests will provide their insight on where they see the future in the market. My guests today include Stephen Siegel, the chairman of global brokerage for CBRE and also a partner at Fairstead Capital. Angelo Genova, the senior partner and founding partner of the law firm Genova Burns. Mark Warren, a partner at the Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group. And last but not least, as I normally call him, the statistician, my friend Bob Knackle, the chairman of New York Investment Sales, Cushman & Wakefield. So, oh guru, oh economist, how does the world look?
Well, Michael, I think the world looks fairly good. I mean, I think from a real estate perspective.
Happy to hear from you. I got Siegel over here in a minute.
No, I think from a real estate perspective, there were issues that were a big concern to the industry, mainly being what was going to happen with capital gains rates, what was going to happen with 1031 exchanges potentially, whether depreciation schedules were going to be changed. And I think based on the election results, those three items are probably not at risk, and capital gains rates may even come down. On the flip side of that, it's likely that carried interest will be taxed at ordinary income rates as opposed to capital gains rates, and that may affect the way transactions are structured. And there are some other issues that could provide benefits and liabilities, but for the most part,
is my apple shiny or is it dull?
Well, from the investment sales perspective, I think if you had a combination of capital gains taxes increasing and the elimination or significant modification of 1031 exchanges, I would probably go on vacation for a year because nothing would happen. But the fact that those two items seem to be okay, I think that is a very positive thing for the investment sales area.
You do a lot of investment sales from around the world, people from the Middle East, people from South America, people from China, people from Japan, all these people, everybody, we did a show a number of months ago with you. I want to buy New York. Foreign investors invade New York. Mark Warren said briefly before I'm going to ask him the question in the green room that last week he was telling the story what happened at a hedge fund.
Sure. So I guess I'd look at the crystal apple, and maybe it would be a little cloudier. I think we need to see what happens before we can make any significant.
But what
decisions.
happened?
I was at an event last week, and a major private equity operator, multi-billion dollars under management. How's it going? Actually, it's going well. I'm in fundraising for Fund X, which is a good thing. We've been 3 times to a certain country. It's in the Middle East. It's not Israel. It's a Muslim country. Their sovereign wealth fund over $100 million. We were approved on Halloween, and they said, but let's just see what happens in the election before we actually cut the check or sign the commitment. And as of last Friday, he had yet to have 3 calls returned from the counterparty. So that's concerning. Real Cap Analytics, I think last week did a calculation. Bob and Steve would probably know better than me, but I think they said 30% of all the sales in 2016 involved a foreign international investor. And if our country's not welcoming to those folks, they could take a pass. That's concerning.
Good example. Angelo represented a major Chinese construction company recently who was building a very large condominium, right, in Jersey City. How do you see the foreign investments in Jersey City and the rest of the market?
I share your sentiments. I mean, I kind of look at it a little bit more from a macro perspective. For me, the jury is still out. On the positive side, I think that you have to presume that given the fact that the Republican Party and the president received the nomination, the president-elect received the nomination of that party, that both houses of the Congress and the presidency are going to be held by Republicans, that they're going to advance an agenda that is going to be user-friendly to the business community in a variety of places. I mean, one statistic that I read, I assumed, but I had it confirmed when I read an article the other day. I mean, this is the first time we've had a president in the White House that comes from the real estate industry, and you would assume his sensibilities and his familiarity with how that industry functions is going to make him user-friendly to a lot of sectors that complement that industry, whether it's banking, whether it's energy, whether it's hospitality, whatever it may be, housing. So on the one hand, you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, so you have a Republican-controlled government advancing business interests, advancing a policies that are going to involve less regulation and the like, and encourage capital investment. And then you have this other piece that you touched upon, which is there's a certain emotion in our economy, and an emotion driven by people's sense of stability, people's sense of direction of the country, and there are other parts of that agenda, like the immigration policy that has been advanced by the president-elect, that could have a bearing on how people feel about investing in this nation, bringing foreign capital into this nation. So I think it's going to be important that it be a combination of those two things, to a stability and a sense of the direction of the country, combined with a Republican agenda that advances business interests that will give people a confidence. So for me, the verdict is out, and I'm no Svengali, but I don't know what the crystal ball will bring.
Here's a point. I happened to just return from Denver over the weekend, and I have not seen more cranes. I thought I was in New York City by the number of cranes for office buildings and residential apartments. Now, the buildings that are being built around the country are being built by many people who are immigrants or foreign laborers, and some of them may have green cards, some of them may not have, but we can't build. You need construction workers. Where are we going to get the construction workers if there is a ban on?
Well, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, why do you believe that
Yeah.
the small percentage of illegal immigrants that might be
I
impacted
didn't
by
say
this can't be
illegal.
replaced and buildings will stop being constructed?
No, but let me tell you, when they could be massive, I ran into an economist that we all know, Dr. Sam Chandon, who's the dean of the NYU Shack Real Estate Institute, and he believes that, There's going to be a lot of construction. A lot of things are going to be very positive over there. You need labor, okay? You know, I don't want to look at it as a vacuum over here in New York, you know, by the number of people.
But
you need people to do this. And I think something that Mark just brought up, which was very important, is that foreign investors, if foreign investors don't feel that the door is open, okay, I'm not sure how willing foreign investors are going to be here.
Foreign investors' money go where they think it's safest and they can get the best returns. And if this country is perceived to be a safe haven for their capital versus some of the other places where they might invest it, England, for example, where Brexit's now shattered their investment market, they're going to invest here. I don't care what the administration's policy may or may not be to that particular country from a political perspective.
Yeah, Michael, on the basis of foreign investment, you have investment coming in from all over the globe. And we have to remember, as dysfunctional as we may think some of our systems are here, on a relative basis, we have relative political stability and we have relative economic stability. And that's what drives a lot of capital here. I think you were seeing for the first time that the most capital from an international destination will be coming in from China for the first time. Canada had always been
Canada
the
was number one. Right.
Area where capital was coming in. China always had the highest number of investors. 2016 will be the first year in which China has both the largest number of investors and the most capital coming.
Do you see Chinese investors continuing to be active in 2017, 2018?
I think
because look at the amount of, in Jersey, a very good example, these two large things that you have found.
Sure, and I tend to agree with the comment that was just made. I mean, if our nation shows a level of stability where people feel that their dollars are safe and that they're not at risk, and our democracy is secure, and our government is secure, then they're going to continue to invest here because that's part of the magnet. Going back to something that you said, though, doing a lot of management side labor work, I hear the voices of the construction industry in different places, and I think this whole question of the availability of an immigrant workforce and the building trades. You talk to the people in the building trades; they feel they're under assault by an immigrant workforce, and that they would probably advance the notion of tighter borders and greater restrictions because that would make more available to domestic workers or those that choose to be domestic workers in that industry the opportunity to work. So, you know, there's two sides to that.
What about
coin.
our food supply? I think that's probably, if we're talking about immigrant labor, our food supply is probably something that's physically closer to us that affects us more. And I'm not an expert in this, but my strong guess is there are probably more immigrants supporting our food supply
industry,
network than are out building buildings of whatever variety.
Well, when we talk about buildings,
Before there was a huge influx or existence of illegal immigrants, somehow the country provided food, buildings were built. I just think that's a non-issue for me. Your crystal ball may say otherwise.
But
I want to ask you a question. I know you're the moderator, but I have a question. No matter what, within reason, this administration does or doesn't do, and it surely seems clear they're going to fuel the business side of the world. Where is there a safer place in this world to invest here?
There is no safer place. I'm very pro on this, but I just wanted other people's opinion. You're active. I mean, in the office market, there are a few people who know what's happening globally and locally on the office market. How do you see the office market today? Has it changed in a week, which it shouldn't have changed? You said to me that you have potential leases for over 1.5 million square feet.
Talking about my own personal team and associations, we have probably 1.5 million square feet of pending transactions, and there hasn't been a speed bump. I mean, nothing. People are continuing as if there was no election. Meetings are going on, plans to move or commit to a location are going on, leases that are out for signature haven't been stalled or close to signature because of, wait, we want to step back and take a look or anything like that.
Do you see some of them saying, since there may be a stimuli for extra things taking place, they need more space?
Not yet, no. We do believe, however, that if all the proposed or things that have been spoken about do occur, there will be more incentives for corporations to grow here than offshore, as they have in the past. And we do think that will expand requirements for square footage, and then there'll be the potential of stabilizing leasing. And Bobby asked me earlier, do I think rents will go down because concessions are up? And that happens to be true, but only because of a lot of new development that's taken people out of existing and older product. And so those buildings have to create a more competitive environment. But I think if there's enough expansion, and it occurs over the next 24 to 36 months, rents will stabilize and begin to rise.
But Steve, wouldn't you say that if Dodd-Frank is modified or relaxed in some way, that could be a shot in the arm for the financial services industry?
I wish I had bank stocks.
Well,
I asked my financial advisor, ex-financial advisor, why I don't have any.
No. I mean, in the past 5 days, the banks have gone up so much, and in addition to the national, international banks, the local banks. I mean, if you want to see some great banks like M&T, who went up from 115 to 140, and some of these other smaller ones going up 10 to 15, 20%. Signature Bank was 120. It's close to 150 today.
Which is especially strange when rates are going up,
Right.
have gone up.
So that
Right.
so how do you see that? Rates are going up. The Treasury bills today are up at least 15% from the rate before. You can't, on your other hat, which is the multifamily side, if you went out for a new loan, you're going to be paying a higher rate because the spreads have to be there. It was 161, today we're at 211. That's close to a 25% rate increase on that.
Still off an awfully, and by the way,
Still
that's a
very
big change.
low, yeah.
Still off an awfully
I
low
mean,
base.
50 basis points is
I'm not
against
disagreeing.
what
And
was.
Michael, a lot of that
That's
had
not gonna
been
make
baked
it.
into the system already because Yellen has been talking about rate increases for a year. So I don't think it's the same. The increase in rates is not the same as it would be if they weren't expected.
Plus, that had nothing to do with the election. That was happening
No question,
regardless.
but I don't believe if you didn't have the election, I don't believe these bank stocks would have.
I'm with Mike.
rebounded
I agree
on
with
this.
you.
Oh, the bank stocks.
People swapped, yeah.
The
bank
based on
stocks-
expectation. No,
the bank
People
stocks are
swap
going up.
fixed income for equities.
And in addition, on the bank stocks, if you look at it this way, Dodd-Frank has really made the banks tighter in their credit requirements. There's no question that the banks have tried to keep their loans to 50, 60% loan to value, different market. How do you see it change, especially that's your other life, okay, in the financing side? Will banks become more liberal? And you remember when they were liberal in 2005, 6, and 7, that was part of the...
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm really not sure that the president's importance for
I'm talking, it's not only president.
Who the president? It's also Congress. Yes.
When we talk about the election, we're talking the presidential, we're talking the Senate, we're talking
Right. Right.
House.
I personally, it's certainly gotten amazingly, exponentially more difficult to arrange construction financing today than a year ago, than 2 years ago. But that's not a bad thing. That provides discipline for the market. So we're not going to see whether it's hotels, although hotels are a little out of control, perhaps in New York. People say condominiums, apartments. It keeps them in check when the requirements get to be as hard as they are. So I think that's actually not a bad thing, and it keeps values up. It keeps the amateur developers from getting the money that last cycle they got and blew up on. So it's not the end of the world. I'm not sure changes from Dodd-Frank are if that's removed, that's going to be the thing that changes, that undisciplines banks. I think that the shareholders are going to be are requiring this. The bank analysts are requiring that, and folks, there's clawbacks. People have seen, not enough probably, but they've seen actual clawbacks happen, and that scares
But if you
bankers.
look at what happened before, M&T Bank, it took them 3 years to buy a Hudson City Savings Bank because of the regulations with SEPIC and so on. Right now, New York Community Bank has been trying to buy Astoria. They have approval over there. It's taken them a year already over this. So now you have a question of different people in different positions over there, different members of the Congress. I mean, all the rest, it's going to have an effect.
Yeah, Michael, I don't think it's so much going to change if Dodd-Frank is modified that all of a sudden banks are going to be lending in an undisciplined fashion. But what it does do is it will minimize probably the amount of compliance people that banks have to hire. That's a big drain on productivity. So if you don't have to have so many compliance people, the banks will be more
Productivity and
productive.
profitability. The cost of running the Dodd-Frank situation for these banks have been enormous. You know, the other subject, the VB5s, which has become very valuable, you know, which many of the large developments, of which office buildings and residential buildings have been taken care of because of the buying the green card for the $500,000 or the $1 million. It's been important. Do you see that having a
I
stymied
believe it's
effect on
already
construction?
dissipating to a great extent.
I agree it was dissipating, but now there's a change in administration. Do you think the new administration will say, look, I'd like that type of money. We need that as a stimuli in our market?
To be determined.
Yeah, I think we have no idea. I mean, the inferences maybe the political issues might defer or deter any investment here in a program like EB-5. Who knows? I mean, I think it's way too early to tell.
But Steve brought up before Brexit. Okay, what effect, you know, we have a Brexit, you know, with people, the way you said it, doesn't like people aren't really investing in London. They're a little worried. Do they?
Yeah.
Brexit is good and bad. It created uncertainty in London. London and New York are the two main destinations for foreign capital into the real estate sector. So on a relative basis, New York looks a little more attractive than London because of the uncertainty created by Brexit. On the flip side of the coin, the uncertainty there and within the Eurozone in general has made the dollar stronger. A stronger dollar is bad for our hospitality industry. And I think the strength of the dollar is something that's misunderstood by a lot of folks, that they say, well, when the dollar's weak, all the foreigners come over here to buy stuff. The fact is that if we have 58 million tourists come to New York this year, only 20% of them will be from outside the U.S. The weak dollar makes it unaffordable for Americans to travel abroad. And now with a stronger dollar, they'll be more likely to go visit Italy or France or wherever rather than
So,
come.
do you see bricks and mortar retail having some difficulties?
I think it's already having some
No,
difficulty.
I mean, just in general, that we've been having difficulties. Do we see more potential with difficulties in bricks and mortar retail?
I don't know if it'll be significantly increased, but you know, the bricks and mortar, Kenneth Cole announced they're closing all their bricks and mortar stores. American Apparel declared final bankruptcy. I think that's already happening. I think, you know, look at stores like Saks and others are having all kinds of
Macy's
issues.
and
They're
all their
opening up.
maneuvers.
They're opening up off-price stores to combat against discount websites, and I don't think that's going to change materially.
But
Because
There are
of
forces
a
that
change in
are
administration.
there are forces in place that are beyond any election, that are just systemic changes in how we do business and in this digital age. One of the things that we haven't touched upon that would touch labor-intensive industries, and hospitality being one of them, is if you talk to employers generally, they're going to be welcoming this administration because they've dealt the last 8 years with a highly regulated employment sector, whether it's through the National Labor Relations Board or through the Department of Labor. And many employers would tell you that the regulatory environment is highly onerous, particularly in the wage and hour space, and the changes that are coming out of the Department of Labor. And to the extent that anyone who operates a labor-intensive industry, in this case hospitality, you ask the question, they're going to look at this administration to relieve them of some of those burdens and allow them to have greater flexibility in the management of their operations, and therefore translate into bottom line profits, to the extent that labor costs are lower, regulatory costs are lower, the burdens of regulation are lower, that those things should translate into those industries.
So following that question, do you see the hospitality assets trading at a higher price? Because they can have lower...
But there's two pieces to it. It may cost less to operate them, but if it costs you more money because of the dollar, as you described, and people aren't going to use the asset, they're not going to go to hotels, they're not going to travel.
If there's lower occupancy, then there's going to be
Sure.
Yeah, Michael,
lower
that
sales.
dynamic will exert upward pressure on value, but the hotel sector generally has had negative pressure exerted on values just because of the point at which we're in the cycle. You know,
Plus-
I believe we're 13, 14 months into a transitioning marketplace when it comes to property values, and land and hotels are the first two sectors to correct.
Mark?
And I would say in New York it's maybe a little bit worse because we have 25, 30,000 hotel rooms being delivered, number one, in certain areas, not all over the place. I think there are 28 or 32 hotels in the market right now for sale, not finding a lot of buyers, and obviously Airbnb is a huge competitor, and we've not yet seen the bottom of
Again, all having nothing to do
Correct.
with
Right,
the
right,
election.
right.
No
all in
question.
place
Systemic.
before and
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe, on your fair stat hat, that the election's having a change on what you're buying in the multifamily world.
No, not at all.
I don't believe it's having any effect on that. I think it is.
If it
it's as
did, we would have
business as normal.
anticipated and waited. We closed on a 1,700 unit apartment complex in June. We might have delayed it until let's see what the election does. If we had any concerns that would impact the viability of that middle income development and its leasability, and ultimately if we choose to refi or sell it.
But some of what everybody just touched upon, like that the election is almost irrelevant to certain forces. There's a flip side to it, and that is part of the challenges to the administration are going to be that to the extent that there's been a promise of fuller employment, a promise of an economy that is going to generate greater participation by a lot more people. Some of these systemic changes are like waves. I don't know how you change or convert how a government can create jobs in an era where jobs are being eliminated, not because of any reason other than new technologies allow for the elimination
Now,
of
the
jobs.
position is they're going to bring jobs here that are being sent overseas, and expansion will occur here now.
Right.
But that's not going to happen overnight.
Well,
it's time and all days to
presumes
succeed.
that those are jobs that can be created again, or that can find a place here, which I think is the assumption that may very well be one that isn't true.
It used to be that China was our low-cost producer. They're not anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's their neighbors, Vietnam, Bangladesh,
Right.
whatever. My wife is in the fashion business, and now the Chinese are not necessarily the cheapest, and that's
She's going to Malaysia, right?
That's very
Right.
that could happen. Hasn't yet, but that's our back office ought to be Mexico. It seems to me,
Yeah.
especially with energy costs. That might not work well in the current administration or the future administration, but to me, Mexico's an awfully good bet. Close. There's a general rule of law. Obviously, they've got drug gangs, but you could argue that it's more democratized there than China.
The weather's nice.
Weather's nice. Good golf courses. Maybe.
Every time I do a show or a speech, someone would ask me, "What inning are we in?" So now, have we gone into a different inning, or do we have a relief pitcher?
We play in baseball or
Okay.
cricket? Is my question.
People would
Talking
say,
related to the election,
yeah.
we're in the top of the first.
So the game has left the seventh inning, okay, for rain.
Brand new ball game.
Okay, so basically the seventh inning was rained out. So the game was 0-0, and now we have a new game, is what you're saying.
Nobody knows what's going to happen.
I think it's very, very tough to tell, Michael.
But one thing is certain, that people in the real estate business were petrified in general about the elimination of the 1031, which was going to affect everybody in other areas also.
Well, yeah, I think certain people in the real estate were petrified. It was a very bad prospect for those of us in the investment and sale.
Mr. Nackel was going to
investments.
be retired. He was going to.
I will never retire. But it
take
might
a
take
year off, he said.
extended
That's
time
all.
off
That's all he said.
if capital gains taxes went up and the 1031s were eliminated. It would have virtually shut down sales for at least 18 months, probably.
And that
But I think
will
one
not
thing we didn't touch on, Michael, which I think is something that could
last
happen.
point, because we have to finish.
Could happen because of the election results is how the trade agreements are handled, and whether the handling of those could potentially antagonize a foreign government to somehow impede the flow of capital. It's already cumbersome to get capital out of China for some folks. To the extent that government was upset with the way they were treated, are they going to change the way capital can flow from that country? Time will tell.
So in summation, old crystal ball, you're not cloudy, you're not bright, but we don't know what the future brings. So in 6 months, hopefully you will all return to see what the predictions or the thoughts came out. I'd like to thank Steve Siegel, Angelo Genova, Mark Warren, and the statistician Bob Nackel. See you next week.